Marcos had everything anyone could want: money, success, power. But time, there was never enough time. His schedule was jam-packed, his life a sea of endless meetings and million-dollar decisions. He didn't see his family. His friends were distant memories, and his health was a bill he hadn't paid yet. But none of it mattered because he was building an empire. That night, walking down a lonely street after another day that stretched past midnight, something caught his attention. A small wooden stand, barely lit by an oil lamp, with a sign in faded letters that read, "Time for sale." Behind the counter, an old man watched him calmly, his eyes shining with a mixture of patience and something else, something disturbing. "Time," Marcos asked with a dry laugh. "What kind of joke is this?" The old man didn't answer. He pulled out a small glass jar filled with golden sand and placed it on the counter. A minute for $1,000, an hour for 50,000, a day for 1,000,000. Marcos scoffed. Absurd, ridiculous. But still, something inside him shuddered. What if it was real? With a mix of disbelief and curiosity, he pulled out his wallet. He bought an hour. The moment the sand touched his skin, he felt dizzy. The world seemed to flicker around him. He closed his eyes for just a moment, and when he opened them, he was in his office. The clock on the wall hadn't moved forward. The meeting he'd left behind was still going on, as if he'd never been away. But he'd lived an extra hour. It was real. He returned to the stand the next day. This time, he bought an entire day. The old man smiled and handed him a larger jar. Marcos signed the check without hesitation. With an extra day, he closed impossible deals, moved projects forward, solved problems before they arose. While the world slept, he kept moving forward. He felt invincible. And soon, one day wasn't enough. He bought weeks, then months. Each bottle made him more powerful. Tiredness disappeared. Fatigue, the need to sleep, even hunger, everything faded into the background. Only time remained. But something began to bother him. He couldn't remember the first few days he had bought. They were like gaps in his mind, blank spaces in his own history. Something was wrong. One night, when he had already bought a whole month, he finally asked, "Where do you get this time?" The old man stopped smiling. "I'm not selling it. I'm trading it." Marcos felt a chill. Trade? With whom? The old man pulled out an old pocket watch and set it on the counter. Opening it, Marcos saw something that made his stomach turn. Names. Dozens of names appearing and disappearing with each tick. Some faded by the second, others by the hour, some by the year. Then he understood. Every minute he had bought, someone, somewhere, had lost it. A child who didn't wake up from his nap. An old man who closed his eyes too early. A man who collapsed in the street without explanation. He had been stealing lives without knowing it. His skin crawled. His mouth went dry. "How much have I taken?" he murmured, his voice cracking. The old man looked at him sadly. "More than you can pay." Marcos ran back to his office, desperate. He picked up his phone, tried calling his assistant, his lawyer. The police? No one answered. He looked at the clock on the wall. The hands didn't move. A cold panic enveloped him. He looked at himself in the reflection of the window glass. His eyes were sunken, his skin paler than ever. His breathing was shallow. He had bought too much. The door opened. The old man entered the office. But this time, he didn't have jars of sand. "There's no more time to buy," he whispered. "Just what you have to return." Marcos tried to speak, but his throat was dry. His legs gave out. He collapsed on the desk. His wristwatch began to rewind. He felt the world fade away. And then, nothing. The next day, On the same dark street, a new stand appeared, but the sign had changed. Now it read, "Time is exchanged." Behind the counter, a young man in an expensive suit and a vacant look waited for the next customer. The wheel kept turning, and time, as always, had a price.